My name is Charles Godse. I'm the outgoing president and CEO of the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association, and I want to welcome everyone to this event, Reimagine Granville Street. And I'll start with a land acknowledgement. So thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we are hosting this event, and Granville Street is located on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Some of our panelists and many of our attendees may be joining from other territories, and it's important that we be mindful of Indigenous communities on whose lands we are meeting, particularly when talking about matters of land use and stewardship. So again, welcome to this event that's co-hosted by the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association and Daily Hive. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion that will begin shortly. In a few minutes, we'll start with a 15-minute presentation from Chris Fair about the Reimagine Granville Street report, followed by a panel discussion moderated by Carm Sumel for about 60 minutes. The Q&A is open, and we encourage participants to ask questions throughout, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible later in the discussion. So I'd like to kick things off. I'll share my screen. I'm just going to make some introductory remarks about Granville Street. Just checking in that you can see the slides. Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so I'll just continue. This was the pinnacle of Granville Street during my tenure as president and CEO of the DVBA. Just a couple of quick sides. The 2010 Winter Olympics. In the past, just a moment here, I'm just having some difficulty exiting slides now. I'll just keep going.
Charles, I think the slides are not showing.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you. In the past decade, Granville Street has had its ups and its downs. Granville Street, north of Robson Street, bustles primarily during the day as a central business district, anchored by Pacific Centre Mall and the Canada Line and SkyTrain stations. This part of Granville Street has seen many changes in the past decade or so. This is just a sample. Makeover by Cadillac Fairview, the former Sears department store building, occupying 3/4 of a city block, to accommodate one of Canada's first Nordstrom and the only one in Metro Vancouver.
Charles, sorry to interrupt. I think your slides are still not showing.
Oh, that's fine. I took them down. I was just showing them. Yeah, that's fine. 2 blocks north of Nordstrom's, the expansion of Hull Renfrew, and the interior renovations and heritage restoration of the Hudson's Bay store. South of Robson Street, the nighttime economy lives here, and the pace of change is much slower, in large part due to city policy that has remained unchanged for way too long. In the past few years, however, a transformation has begun with the introduction of more daytime uses, more diverse uses such as office space. The former Timely Music Store in the 900 block was converted to a co-working space, currently occupied by Deloitte and its 500+ workers. Imagine the impact of adding 500+ workers into what is predominantly an entertainment district that is busy almost exclusively on weekends, and how that can stimulate economic activity in the area, support locally independently owned businesses, and create employment. New restaurants and retail stores opened as well. Existing restaurants extended their hours of operation to include breakfast and lunch. And spaces that have been dark for too long, not due to the pandemic, will soon be occupied again. The best example of the site is the former movie theater across from the legendary Commodore Ballroom that is being repurposed by Cineplex to be one of this region's newest rec room, an entertainment destination featuring food, drinks, games, and live entertainment. Despite these developments, Granville Street south of Robson Street has fallen behind as an entertainment district in comparison to other entertainment districts in Canada. This revelation came about from an analysis by Chris Fair and his team at Residence Consultancy while in the process of developing a new vision and a path forward to a reimagined Granville Street. I'll share one finding with you and encourage you to read the entire document. Vacant street-level retail space along Granville Street increased from 9% in 2010 to 16% in 2020. Vacant space is in third place of most popular uses behind entertainment leisure at 25% and comparison retail at 17%. The pandemic has hit downtown restaurants and retailers particularly hard. 84 street-level businesses have permanently closed within the downtown BIA. Almost half of them were restaurants. 31 of the 84 closed businesses were on Granville Street. The number of street-level businesses that closed in 2020 along Granville Street is almost double the 2019 number, 31 versus 16. Now, there is some positive news. 12 new street-level businesses opened on Granville Street in 2020, higher than any other retail street within the BIA, and higher than the previous year when only 7 new businesses opened along Granville Street. Granville Street is at a crossroads. We can all collectively sit on our hands and do nothing and hope that the street rebounds from the pandemic without intervening. We can try to convince ourselves that the current city policies are working, knowing that they are not, and watch Granville Street decline even further. Or we can be bold, embrace the new vision for Granville Street, and collectively work to save and make this entertainment district better than what it was before the pandemic hit, more diverse, more vibrant, safe for everyone. The choice is crystal clear for me. What about you? So those are my introductory remarks. And what I'd like to do now, and before you hear from our panelists, is introduce Chris Fair, President and CEO of Residence Consultancy, and he'll give us a short presentation on the Reimagining Granville Street report. Chris is a futurist, development strategist, and facilitator who holds a master's degree in studies of the future. As president of Residence, Chris leads a team that has completed more than 100 visioning, strategy, planning, and branding projects for destinations, districts, cities, and developers in more than 20 countries. He's the chairman of the Urban Land Institute's Travel Experience and Trends Council, a member of the Project for Public Spaces Leadership Council, and a past instructor in placemaking at New York University. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to share my screen here and walk you through some of the highlights of the report that we created for the Downtown Vancouver BIA, and talk to you a little bit just about some of our key takeaways. And of course, you can download the full report in more detail, and want to make sure we save as much time for the panel as possible. As Charles mentioned, our team at Resonance works and has been working recently with cities from Florida to California to Calgary on helping think about the future and the impact of COVID on revitalizing, and what does that mean for the long-term resiliency of their downtowns and their cities. Of course, living here in Vancouver, and our office is just a block away from Granville Street, this was particularly important to us, and is a passion project for our team to think about the city that most of us live in and work in. Our objectives as we looked at the report for this particular project really fell into 4 areas. One was thinking about not just recovery, but how do we shape and create long-term resiliency to support the existing businesses on Granville Street? And then second, how do we sort of stimulate and diversify that economy and the community that lives and works around Granville Street? And the third was then also thinking about how does this area and part of downtown become more livable and sustainable, as a neighborhood? And the fourth piece was then thinking about how do we position or develop the Granville Entertainment District, as a leading destination, not only in our city, but internationally, as many times the downtown or a particular street or the entertainment district, within a city often defines perception of the city as a whole. So I'll share with just a few slides on, what, based on some of the research that we did and what we heard in terms of Granville Street today. And I think there's a couple of insightful pieces to look at actually, before the pandemic. And this are ongoing research that the Downtown Vancouver BIA has conducted in terms of looking at, well, where do people, when we say downtown, where are they going? And, Granville Street has been and continued to be the most popular destination, within the city. But you can see other areas like the Stadium District is starting to grow in terms of popularity between 2017 and 2019. So and then we think about why are they coming to downtown Vancouver? The number one reason is entertainment. And it's actually, interesting. We've talked a lot about the effect of remote work, and we've all been working from homes and how that's impacted downtown. But kind of unique for Vancouver versus other city centers is actually coming downtown to work is the lowest reason that people frequented the downtown peninsula. The primary reason they're coming is number one for entertainment, number two is for dining out, number three is for shopping. But you can kind of see here over the progression between 2008 and 2019, while entertainment was consistent and actually eating was pretty consistent as well, coming downtown for shopping, or sightseeing was actually dropping off. And this is prior to the pandemic. Another key learning as we looked at this of thinking about, takeaways of, what is it that drives, if entertainment is the number one reason, people are coming downtown. It's interesting to look at and see that the number one type of entertainment people are coming for is by far and away, is music, versus other types of entertainment, such as going to see live theater or going to movies, has been in decline. So it's important as we think about the effect that the pandemic has had on places. There were changes and things that were happening in our cities and entertainment districts long before COVID. And so there's some secular trends here that we need to be mindful of as we think about a future for Granville Street, that we're not just reacting to the decimation caused by the pandemic, we're also reacting to trends that were in place well before COVID ever came along. So as we we talked about with stakeholders and did a future forum, we learned a few other things as well. And this kind of summarizes what we learned out of this whole process and the research and analysis that, Granville Street still remains a destination for culinary experiences and entertainment. It's a key driver. However, a lot of feedback from stakeholders was that this was gradually being superseded by Gastown, Yaletown, maybe even emerging around the Stadium District. Today we see, as Charles mentioned, that 25% of all the retail spaces in the Granville Entertainment District is devoted to entertainment. And the second largest is comparison retail, but the third is actually vacant spaces, which had grown to 16%. Among the different strengths identified by our stakeholder group was that we have this location, that Granville Street is the historic main street in a figurative sense, but also geographically of downtown Vancouver. We have some amazing heritage components. There still is a strong music scene and events that happen on Granville Street. Some of the key issues that were identified, of course, were around crime, the retail vacancies, but also a lack of coordination between the various stakeholders in terms of who develops and manages this destination within the city of Vancouver. We also talked to stakeholders and said, well, as we think about this is what's happened now, what's happening that might affect the future, and what are some of the key trends? And we looked at the rise of tech and creative industries, and we're seeing that manifest itself with Amazon's redevelopment of the post office building, or we have Microsoft and other tech companies that have moved into this area. We also looked at other cities and see that the idea about entertainment districts or streets just dedicated to nightlife is a bit of an antiquated notion, that today these districts are evolving into 24-hour centers of activity, where there's business and activity by day, and yes, maybe nightlife and entertainment by night, but they're not dedicated to one single use. We also talked about the shift in the trend towards localism in retail in terms of both locals and visitors seeking out goods and services that are made by local brands. We talked about the rise of today in Canada, the most common type of household isn't a family, it's a single person living alone in a household today, and what that means for residential. And we talked also about sort of this boom in experiential leisure, that while we all feel that we're busier than ever before, historically, if you look over the last 50 years, we each have more leisure time on average per week than we've ever had before, and are looking for different activities and experiences to spend that time in. So based on this context, we developed a vision statement. This is a bit of a synopsis of, what did we think that Granville Street could become? We said it could be the city's cultural heart and develop into a coherent and complete main street connected to surrounding neighborhoods in balance with its different uses and heritage. It can welcome more festivals, including downtown's first urban street festival. It can become a dining destination featuring Vancouver's first restaurant row. And it can embrace community building and placemaking and attract growing innovative and creative companies to look forward to a cosmopolitan future and a 24-hour economy. So how do we get there? I'll hit just on some of the key development opportunities and recommendations that were highlighted in the report. The first was really thinking about a balanced and complete street that's also connected to the surrounding neighborhoods. There's been a lot of development on either side of Granville Street, but Granville Street is a bit of a time capsule, if you will, in terms of what's happened on that street over the last decade relative to what's happened around it. So how do we design this as a street that promotes active transportation, multimodal, but is a street, for people? And how do we also capitalize on all the interesting work that's been done and proposed on the Granville Bridge redesign of limiting some of the lanes for cars and transforming that into pedestrian and park space? Can that be the start of a corridor that moves all the way north down Granville Street and not just exist as an island on its own? We looked at and have recommendations around this being a more diverse and inclusive street. That, how do we acknowledge and incorporate participation from First Nations groups as part of not just the identity, but the activity of the street? How do we support diversity and inclusivity amongst residents and businesses, and invest in community relations as part of this, so that Granville Street really becomes the key hub of the downtown identity? We looked at and talked about these recommendations in the report around placemaking, quality of life, and safety. Of course, public safety, as we saw in some of the research, in terms of crime being one of the perceived issues on the street, and part of that can be solved through placemaking, greening of the street, improving the living conditions of the SROs that are on Granville Street. That essentially, if we can bring more people at all times of day and all days of the week to Granville Street, that we can improve both quality of life and safety on the street. I think one of the core areas of the recommendations, really shapes, what Granville Street's heritage was as an entertainment district. But maybe, as we saw in just some of that brief synopsis of the data, the definition of entertainment is evolving and changing, so that our plan and the policy around Granville Street needs to change with that. So how do we think about positioning Granville Street as maybe not an entertainment district in the old-fashioned sense of the word, but as a cultural district? How do we create a framework for a variety of different events? How do we create infrastructure versus that light electricity that allows for programming of pop-up events and activities that support that cultural identity of the street? How do we present, our history? There's other recommendations specific to that. And also, diversifying that cultural programming and thinking about how we can support different pop-up initiatives, that there's a way of thinking about Granville Street, not just as a street, but as a stage for culture within Vancouver. We looked at and talked about, the public space being designed for artistic expression. The Downtown Vancouver BIA has done some great work with various, laneways in the city. How do we think about some of that placemaking and that creative placemaking activation happening both in traditional ways through things like paint and public art, but also digitally in terms of lighting and different types of interactions that could be done to complement sort of from the neon history into the digital future, that becomes an expression of the identity of Granville Street and downtown. I thought one of the ideas was around creating a urban street festival. There are different street events, but nothing well defined in Vancouver compared to other cities around the world. And that this urban street festival, where we actually close the street at certain periods of time, could become a signature event and celebration that helps shape and inform the identity of Granville Street. We also had this idea around creating a restaurant row, that we see that, the set number 2 reason people are coming downtown before the pandemic, and we expect that this will come back quite quickly, is coming downtown for dining. So right now there are a variety of restaurants on Granville Street, but it's not really packaged or programmed or having an identity. So how do we think about creating a restaurant row, as it were, as part of Granville Street? And that can be shaped through a permanent patio program. One of the things that has come out of the pandemic is a lot of innovation around how we use public space. So what have we learned out of that that we could apply and make permanent, that also would help inform? And we've also seen liberalization of some of the liquor licensing and regulations. How does that tie into the patio program? And how do we help curate and support new businesses to encourage the development and filling in and creating that density of restaurants as part of the street? One of the things we mentioned is that we think about this as a culture, whether you use the word cultural district or entertainment district or destination. Really, we need to think about this as a 24-hour economy and a 24-hour street, not just a destination for nightlife, or entertainment. So that we're looking at and thinking about, well, if culture and entertainment is one of the core offerings and is the key identity, what other uses complement that would bring visitors and residents to live or work on this street during the daytime as well? So this really thinks about looking at supporting local businesses through potentially thinking about how we increase the density or update zoning on the street so that there is incentive for development of additional office space that would bring people to the street. Also thinking about alternative forms of entertainment. What is beyond live theater, which we have some amazing venues. As you think about this experiential leisure boom, what are the next forms? And the work that Cineplex is doing and that you hear about with the Rec Room is a good example of that, of evolving from a cinema into a multifaceted entertainment and dining experience. In complement with that, as you think about the 24-hour city or the 24-hour street, is the most likely best match to that is thinking about Granville Street as an innovation corridor that kind of complement, the best complement to nighttime use during daytime is for office. And while we've seen a lot of offices go vacant in the last year, Vancouver's in an enviable position of being an in-demand center and cluster for creative industries. And we expect that to not only recover quite quickly, but continue to grow, for the long term as Vancouver grows. Can Granville Street be this innovation corridor and an engine for development of employment and attract innovative creative companies as you look at some of the migration of tech companies moving towards this side of downtown? And that's just a brief synopsis of some of the many different recommendations. We'll be sharing a link. You can download the full report on the Downtown Vancouver BIA's website. And we look forward to the conversation that continues. Again, the report isn't necessarily a recipe that has all of the answers, but it is a roadmap that points us in a direction towards what we think is important, where we should be going, and some of the ideas in terms of both policy, programming, and product development and placemaking that could help create and realize that vision that we described for Granville Street in the years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. My my internet went down at the beginning of your presentation, but I'm familiar with the report. But I am back, and Chris, I just want to thank you and your team for doing this work for the DVBIA. It's been so insightful for the organization, and a great starting piece for the organization to rebuild Granville Street in the recovery. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the discussion, Carm Sumel. He is the CEO and co-founder of Daily Hive. He is born and raised Vancouverite. Carm started Density Buzz back in 2008 after seeing an opportunity to connect locals, share untold stories, and celebrate the community. I have to say that working with Carm and the people at Daily Hive in the early days was really exciting. It still is, but they brought us an idea in those early days of having a public celebration New Year's Eve, and we'll never forget the enthusiasm they shared with everyone and got our organization behind that. So Daily Hive started out as a passion project, and it's grown into one of the largest digital media publications in Canada, expanding from coast to coast and amassing 18 million monthly page views. That's so impressive. So Carm, over to you.
Thanks, Charles. And thanks, Chris, for that that presentation on the residence report. I know I've seen it before, and I know a lot of the panelists have obviously seen it as well. And I think it was great to share that with a lot of the other members, and hopefully a lot more citizens can see that report. And Charles, I mean, you said a lot of kind words, but I want to say thank you for being one of the coolest old white dudes that I know. I share a little story before we kick into this. Is like when I first met Charles, I was like, oh man, I don't think this guy's gonna want to listen to what I have to say. And boy, was I wrong. So, when your parents say don't judge a book by its cover, it works both ways. You may look at me and say some stuff, but I looked at Charles and I made some assumptions in my head. I was like, oh, I don't know if he's gonna want to hear anything I got to say, but he's cool. And Charles, you've done a great job, over the years, and it's been a pleasure working with you. So thank you for that introduction. Before we kick off, right into the questions and whatnot, I want to introduce the panelists. I got my notes here because it's a lot of information to kind of decipher. So I want to go make sure I don't miss anything. I'll go in order of how you guys are on my screen. We got Christina Kuipers. Christina Kuipers, she's an entertainment and hospitality executive with over 17 years of experience in concept development, operations management, and consulting with leading hotels, restaurants, theaters, and entertainment venues in Canada, the US, and the Middle East. As a senior VP of revenue management at Cineplex, Christina currently oversees concept development and design, food and beverage, amusement, gaming and attractions, entertainment, and groups and events for multi-brand portfolio of 174 theaters and large-scale entertainment venues across Canada. That's a lot of that. You got a lot going on, Christina. I'm looking at that bio. I was like, God damn, she's busy. Next, I don't know if there's anything I missed.
No, it's great. Thanks.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Next, we got Christina Lau, or as she likes to be called, K Lau. She is an artist advocate from Hong Kong with over 15 years working internationally as a curator and creator. As executive VP of corporate social responsibility for Prolific Media Holdings, she specializes in career pathway initiatives in media and entertainment. That's just our shoddy desks of Daily Hive. With a passion for reducing barriers to entry and championing sustainable creative careers. Christina is a podcast host, an actor, a songwriter, and serves on the board of directors at Music BC and Cushy Entertainment. Next, we got Nate Sabine. Me and Nate go way back as well. Nate, you guys are one of the first ones to believe in Daily Hive and actually write a check for us. And I remember that. It wasn't a big check, but it was a check, and I still appreciate it.
That story all the time.
It wasn't a big check, but it was a check, and we needed that check to pay some bills. So I appreciate that. Nate is the director of business development for Blueprint. Nate's background in marketing and culture leads to his current role of senior business advisor at Blueprint. He's dealt with he deals with various levels of government relations, brand partnerships, public relations, and sponsorship. Nate touches every one of Blueprint's ventures. In addition, he serves as president of Music BC and sits on the board of the DVBIA and the Hospitality Vancouver Association. Last but not least, Charles Gauthier. He's given an intro. He's already introduced himself. I don't know what more we can say. I mean, he's the outgoing president, and he holds a master's of city planning from the University of Manitoba and has been steering the DVBA since 1992, which is 29 years, right? Charles, not 30. So he's been the recipient of the Business in Vancouver's prestigious 40 Under 40 Achievement Award, the Downtown Vancouver Association President's Award, and a bunch of other accolades. He served on numerous boards during his career, including the Business Improvement Areas of BC, the BC chapter of the Canadian Society of Association Executives, the International Downtown Association, and the Vancouver New Year's Eve Celebration Society, which I had the pleasure to be on the same board with you. The 40 Under 40, Charles, that was a while ago, eh?
Yeah, it was. It's
I had to throw that in there.
I knew you might say something like that.
Look, if I can't say something funny, then why you even got me on this as a moderator? I mean, I don't think I've missed anything. I think, it's great to have everybody here on the panel. This is something that everybody on this panel is passionate about, but I think a lot of people forget that a lot of people are very passionate about their city and the way and the direction that the city is going in. And we've heard it more so than ever before in the last few years, where there's there's just a little bit of complacency that I think people have seen from some of their leaders. And for today's panel, we're focusing on one element, which is Granville Street, and revitalizing it and taking it to becoming the street that we all think it can become. So I think we should just dive right into it. I think I was going to ask each one of you guys to maybe give your reaction to the residence report. I'll go in order of my screens, and then we'll just I'll call upon you. You guys say your bit, and then we'll go on. And if feel free to jump in and act, if you want to, suggest something else to and disagree with what someone is saying, or go along with it. I want this to be kind of a flowing discussion as opposed to a rigid Q&A. It's better that it just flows. So maybe Christina Kuipers, go with you first.
Absolutely. Well, we are living that future. I mean, what I have in my background here is the rendering from the street level of our development of the rec room on Granville. And, we're still a little ways away from being able to open. It's quite a project in terms of the restoration of the 3 heritage facades that we're uniting into this single entertainment venue. But what's thrilling is we're taking what was once our theater and once a storied history of 3 separate buildings that were hotels in the past, that have been retail storefronts, that have had so many different lives throughout the decades. And now we get to honor this street and the vision for the street and what's possible by bringing really a category busting entertainment one-stop destination that we hope will also help to complement the reinvigoration of Granville as a destination upon itself. So, a destination within a destination is really what, I can contribute to this conversation and to, I think, with a narrative with respect to what, the potential Granville holds.
Thank you. Kay Lau.
Hello. I just want to say hi to everyone that's watching and listening right now first, and thank you to Com for moderating. To answer your first question, what did I take from? I'm a notes person. I take a lot of notes. So, what did I take from that presentation that Chris so articulately presented to us? Was number one, the concept of what makes something livable and what makes something sustainable. We're talking about a street, but I think we've, as a group of panelists, had a conversation on a much larger scope about Vancouver, about BC. And so the questions that were popping up, and I tend to have a lot more questions than I have answers, was what is it that we're talking about in terms of sustainability? Because we have investment that's, we have financial investment, but there's also this, a social currency that we need to be investing in. And having lived in a lot of different places in the world, I think that's a conversation that is much more nebulous, but much more necessary than ever, especially with the onset of COVID. I was interested in the emerging trends, the concept of experiential leisure. I'm a pretty wordy, nerdy person, and I think what I was hearing was a lot about street festivals, restaurants, what we could do. But what I want to know is, how do we connect with existing industries and change makers and connect us together? And then, instead of talking about what we could do and what we can do, how do we host an effective, productive, facilitative development of a city, rather than any kind of, forgive me, but a traditional structure, an authoritarian structure of this is what makes most financial sense. We're now in a social realm where we need to have different types of conversations. And so that's what really came up to me when I was listening to the presentation. There are a lot of incredible people in this city, and a lot of incredible people who are very invested in Granville Street, and looking at those graphs that came up, and the trends that are coming up. How do we not support or support local businesses, but how do we create space for businesses that organically are going to come up? And I think those are 2 very different conversations, rather than how do we give money to something, as opposed to how do we create space for pre-existing talent. And that, Nate and I have had a lot of conversations about. Christina and I have had conversations. I come from a lens of career pathways and building sustainable futures, facilitating identity, incubating talent which begets then engaging audiences in a sustainable way. That's my 2 cents on that.
That was really well put. I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of things, and we'll probably dive into a lot of that after, but incubating creativity and is not something that this government is really good at allowing.
I don't know about that. I think that there are people in government who are really trying.
I think they are. I think they are. And I think a lot of them are watching this today. I think that there's just been a little bit of a lull, and I don't know if it's COVID lull or whatever, and maybe we can give some people benefit of the doubt, but there has been a little bit of a lull. And I think, me and Nate have talked about this quite a lot when we go on our walks. Sometimes it's just like, there's so many cool people doing cool things in the city, but they all feel like they need to leave because they don't feel like they get the support, whether or not that's valid. Because, Kayla, you just said, like, I don't know, like, I think there's plenty of great people, but people feel that way. So there's something missing, there's something missing that doesn't connect those dots from, City Hall to the citizen.
Amazing point. I totally agree with that. That's what your job now. That's your job.
Right. Yeah, that's my job. That's a big ass job. Anyways, we'll dive into more of that a little bit later. I know I like to go off topic a lot, but I want to keep it to the topic. Nate, maybe give your reactions to the residents report.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no matter how many times I've looked at that report and read through it, I find very little fault or very little missing with it. I think that they know exactly what we need and what we're doing, or what needs to get done rather. And I've had the pleasure of sitting with Chris a couple of times, because it was about 4 or 5 years ago when I really got involved with Charles and the DVBIA, when the then city council and mayor voted for a lockout on Granville Street, wherein we wouldn't be allowed to let new patrons into our venues after a certain time. So it was like they wanted to lock us out at 1 o'clock, and our hours until 3 a.m., which is ludicrous. And we did all sorts of stuff, like flying in the original nightmare in the world from Amsterdam and having him speak to city council and speak to the DVBIA and doing all these things. But what rolled out of that for me was, and being able to sit with Chris, was understanding that pre all of this pandemic craziness, that we were on a mission as a city, just in North America, that we are competing for tech workers, for all this young money, to keep, and like we talk about, Carm, to keep people from moving to Toronto, to Montreal, to Los Angeles, and keeping our cultural communities, and how important nightlife was to that, and how important entertainment districts were to that. Because you get out of school and you're getting offered $200,000 a year to work anywhere. What's going to make you choose Vancouver over San Francisco? So I think that there's a ton of stuff that we need, but that resonance report nails it. We need diversity, we need different programming, we need a city council and mayor that are supportive of these things. We need just some progressive thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Dudes coming from, there's people coming from all over the world. They're not coming from small towns anymore. They're coming from big cities in Europe, South America, Asia. They come to Vancouver and they're like, where's the party? And I see it because I live a couple of blocks away from Granville, and you just see kids wandering around. And I say kids lightly, I mean, they're like 25, 26, but you see them just wandering around looking for something to be open where they can get in. And if you want to compete for talent and you want immigrants to settle here at this critical junction of their life where they want a little bit of entertainment and they have that flexibility to spend that money because they are unattached, they don't have any other responsibilities of children and maybe even a significant other, why would they choose Vancouver when Toronto and Montreal embrace a lot of this cultural and entertainment? And that's just Canada. You go down to America, you go down to Europe, there's a lot of that kind of going on. So like those are probably a lot of recurring themes that I know me and you have talked about, Nate. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Charles? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Kayla.
Can I jump in on that statement that you just made though? Because I want to ask it and direct a question to Christina, and not to myself. I don't refer to myself in the third person, just FYI. So you made a point saying, people who are potentially unattached, people who don't have that money to spend on entertainment. I just want to push back to the audience, to everyone who's listening right now, and say that's one pocket of entertainment. But Christina and I had a great conversation about the new development, about what Cineplex is doing, and all ages spaces are so important. Incubating audiences, incubating not just talent, but entertainment as a cultural thing, rather than entertainment as getting drunk on a Friday night in whatever club you can get into. And I think that's a reimagination of a conversation. And having lived in England and playing in all of these pubs around the country, and then playing in national tours around the country in theater productions, there is a very different I think conversation that is to be had, that a lot of people of all ages, curators that I know, friends of mine, I know that some of them are listening, G-Love, Vancouver Mural Festival people are on here, wanting to create accessible, all ages events that help to nourish our souls as people who crave social gathering. So I just wanted to put that there before you go to Charles. I wanted to chuck that in and ask Christina about those spaces and what your vision is, Christina.
Well, one of the critical decisions we had to make and for many of you who are very familiar with the liquor licensing obstacle race, it's we had spent a lot of time amassing the liquor seats that we needed in order to have this entertainment venue. And when I was reviewing our design and concept last year, and I should note that obviously in observance of each of the provincial laws in which we operate, these are always all ages spaces, but we typically have all of our games floors. So really the rec room is a combination of eats and entertainment. The dining portion, there's a full service restaurant bar, as well as more of a snack style concept that you can walk up to called the Shed. The entertainment is really comprised of two major components. One is the amusement, gaming, and attractions. And the attractions can include VR, they can include bowling, axe throwing, all kinds of really fun and active play. And the arcade gaming is both redemption and video games. But the other part of the entertainment is also live produced and curated entertainment. And we offer a lot of complementary curated programming, but also really interesting programming that spans, from, and it's been so amazing to see the diversity of music and cultural events we've been able to host. Everything from, sports talks to robot wars to drag shows to K-pop nights, Latin nights. I mean, who throws a Latin night in the middle of the Calgary Stampede? We do, because there are people who don't want to be at the Calgary Stampede, and we want to provide entertainment for them. So it's about recognizing how you can play into a community as well as part of the regular sort of annualized, ritualized programming and festivals, as well as also some of the counter programming to recognize the other communities that may not be as well represented. And so we made the decision, and I really reviewed this last year as we were going through again, fine-tooth comb, looking at the licensing, and made the final decision to actually go with the restaurant licensing, because it was really important to also make our spaces available to underage people throughout the day. And frankly, part of the genesis of the concept itself of having this amusement component, which is very significant, is to provide alternate amusement, quite literally, from just hanging out and consuming drinks and food. Drinks and food are an amazing way to socialize, and there's a plethora of amazing options. And I was born in Vancouver. I've lived all around the world. I've lived in Vancouver again since, and you have some of the best restaurants in the world, honestly, I truly believe, and some of the greatest cocktail bars and great places to go. But as we studied the generations and their preferences as they came up, and as we look at also different cultures and representation of different cultures, and living in the Middle East as well, a lot of the concept development I did was non-alcoholic programming in Dubai and in the UAE for application across the KSA, Kuwait, and other countries in that region for whom drinking is not a part of their practice. And so you have to look at other kinds of entertainment ways for people to socialize, and competitive and active play is something that we're definitely bringing to the table with their amusement gaming. And I'm excited to be able to facilitate really fun, nights out and days out by having this space that people can, can enjoy in the way that it makes sense for them and honor their culture and their societal rituals, but do so in a mixed way. And that was really the other thing, was embracing and recognizing too, that, if you don't accommodate people, then you are essentially giving a monocultural view to what you are bringing to a community. So, that is the other thing I would call out, is that, you have to be clear in the sort of the thesis and the concept that you're bringing. Otherwise, you're trying to be everything to everyone, and you can't be that. But you also can create the platform and the space for and the room for people to explore. And that's the biggest part of play, is discovery and dialogue. And that is the thing that we are trying to facilitate the most.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The idea of all ages and everybody being able to enjoy Granville Street, and the idea of it becoming a 24-hour street, you allow that to kind of naturally happen, right? Because you evolve it throughout the day as the programming goes on. And then, yeah, maybe it does become a nightclub and a bar district after a certain hour, and there's nothing wrong with kids wandering around that. My kid sometimes doesn't go to bed. We go for drives or whatnot, and he's 10 years old. He sees all the debauchery that goes on in Granville. And I always point to him, I was like, one day that's going to be you standing on the street waiting to get into one of those clubs and bars. Just be lucky enough to know that maybe your dad can get you in because he knows the guy, right? So he sees it. And I think we try to shelter society by not showing these elements to kids, like drinking is bad. Like, if it's so bad, then why do we even allow it? Why does BC Liquor have stores everywhere? It's not bad. It's just bureaucracy that kind of meddles with, how people can enjoy it with the rules and stuff. So I think, you guys can hit on the head.
Responsible.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, like I don't know. I go by the adage: the more rules you throw in someone's face, the more they're gonna act out.
I like where this conversation has gone, because I think that Kayla, thanks for bringing it up, and CK, thanks for kind of elaborating on the vision of Cineplex and what you want to do in with your particular development, because the DVBI has been saying for years that, Granville Street, or the GED, needs to be, much more broad, much more inviting to a much broader demographic. And the daytime uses, were definitely lacking there. And I referenced it in my opening remarks on, the vision that the Bonas family has for Granville Street. They have several holdings the full length of Granville Street. And, they do want to build more office space in the GED area to complement, what they've done with the Tom Lee Music Building. And I think that is the path forward. And I think the report that Chris Fair and Residents has presented talks about that. We want to have it more inviting to a much broader demographic. And I just feel that Granville Street south of Robson can be so much more and serve a variety of different purposes that I think we're limiting ourselves when we say this is just the nighttime economy. It can be so much more, but the current restrictions, and I think, what's in place now, doesn't provide the incentives for developers to move forward. And so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation now, and there's a number of councillors and city staff that are joining in and listening. And it was this particular council, that supported that vision that Cineplex put forward. It was actually one of their first, within the first 6 months, that they supported the project. And as I step out of this role, I would encourage this council, to be bold, to continue to be bold and push the envelope of what we can do for Granville Street.
Tom, you said something before we started the panel today about, and I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to restate what you said about culture converging with commerce. I think that's a really good addition to what Charles just said.
Yeah, I think what I was saying is that, Granville Street is our street, right? It's the street. I think it should be our celebration street. It's our premier street. I can't think of another street where and I think Chris's residence report showed people come to Granville, tourists flock to Granville, and when they get here, they're like, this is it. Like, a lot of them are very underwhelmed by it, not only during the day, but even at night, right? And that just goes back to, I think it's just the lack of vision and lack of leadership at City Hall. It is not recognizing the fact that this is such a critical street. You know, it's like the spine of downtown core, and we have neglected it for too long. And it, you know, upwards to like the idea of commerce and culture converging on the street is basically, you know, how I see it. You know, you have offices, you have retail, you have culinary restaurants and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the culture with nightclubs, events, performance space, you know, Cineplex, Rec Room now going in, you got the bowling alley at Commodore Lanes, all of that on one strip. It, you know, that's awesome, but we haven't realized it fully to what its potential can be. We take bits and pieces and then we kind of like, we get scared, you know? And oddly enough, what today is marks 10 years to the day of the riots that happened. And if you weren't in Vancouver and, you know, growing up, you see it, like there was a rise. People are like, oh, they're so happy. Finally, Vancouver was embracing this idea after the Olympics of, hey, we can have fun and celebrate and have a good time. We're not a no fun city. Let's just loosen things up a little bit, activate the city and watch what happens. And we did great. And then 2011, the riot happened, one singular event, and the city just got gun shy. They stopped doing all this programming because they got scared that this was going to happen again and the negative PR that they were going to get. And to this day, they haven't recovered from it fully. Large scale events, new ones, are always met with a little bit of hesitation. It shouldn't be that. We should be getting people out of their condos and homes, congregating together in massive events. That's how you build community. That's how you foster, you know, a sense of identity. That's how you get rid of this whole social isolation that everybody says in Vancouver exists. You know, people feel isolated. Why? You don't give them a reason to get out of the damn house. You know? So Nate, you want to say something?
Yeah. And I agree with you to a certain extent, but you know, with everything that's gone on, and I want to give a little bit of credit to our current council and mayor, because we've gotten a lot of stuff passed through, some of which we are working on pre-COVID, but you know, everything, the temporary patios and all these things that have actually made a big impact on the communities, and everyone's sense of well-being, if I can go that far during this tough time. Do you think though that like, there's any, like, how complicit is the public in this, in having the options and not taking them, in just sitting back and being like, no, you know, Vancouver's still no fun city? Because I remember very well when it really was, right? I started working on Granville Street in 1996, in the kitchen of this restaurant. And I've been working in or on businesses since then on Granville Street. And it was tough. Like, permitting was way tougher, this, that, and the other thing. Like, there was a lot of looser stuff going on in the background. But when I hear someone now say, oh, Vancouver's a no fun city, I'm like, well, you're not trying hard enough. Like, try fucking Googling something and find something to do.
No,
Google it.
yeah. No, I do. Like,
participation.
I don't know.
Part of it, you know, it's I can't tell you what a delight it is, because, you know, we obviously are open to the public daily in our rec rooms across the country, but we do a lot of events. And I don't just mean the live, you know, entertainment and cultural events. I also mean hosted groups and events, bookings for social, you know, gatherings for corporate functions. And this is what I mean about, you know, you know, you have to participate. There's nothing more fun than watching people who are sort of aloof and a bit jaded and maybe a bit cynical and a bit embarrassed, you know, to either in front of their coworkers or people they don't know that well. And then watching them, no joke, 15 minutes later, battling it out with Super Mario Kart, battling it out on Halo, battling it out with these games and sweating. And honestly, spectators, you know, honestly rallying each other and having, just letting their guard down and trying something. So many people have said, I'm just not into video games. And they walk in and about an hour later, I see them just with a sparkling joy in their faces as though they were children again. And it's all about releasing that inhibition and trying something new. And, you know, same thing with axe throwing. It's terrifying to some people. Others go in and they go, I'm going to be amazing at this. And they're awful, but they have the best time. And that's really about it, you know, about having the humility and having the sense of adventure to just try something new. And I think that reintroduction, when you try something new again in a social environment in which, all of a sudden the stakes go from really high to low and the barrier to entry is removed, that's liberating because it emboldens you to try new things beyond that. So I have found that it's been a great catalyst, to reintroduce the spirit of play. I think about, when I was growing up and we moved countries every 2 years, I didn't think twice about sounding like an idiot in a new language because I wasn't inhibited whatsoever. I signed up for an, Italian course in university, and I did horribly because I was so preoccupied with how many mistakes I was going to make. And that's just a personal experience. I'm sure everybody can relate in their own way, but it's about re-engaging that spirit of experimentation and adventure and fun. And that's part of that, okay, sure, you may have this identity around, this is a no fun city, but are you a no fun person is really the question.
I want to jump in there though, because there were two things that we talked about just before. The fact that, and I wasn't here for the no fun bit. I arrived and was like, I don't know where to go and play and perform or what to do. So I just literally called people. I called the Roxy. I called like any venue I saw. I was like, can someone meet with me? I'll buy you a coffee to find out what Vancouver is doing and what it's like. I started a whole collective just because I was determined to win at understanding this city. And Christina and I have had conversations about being transnational kids and coming from different countries, and that being a huge part of our personal identity is figuring out what's going on in a city. But I noticed that someone mentioned on one of the Q&A points that, some people here are so tired. Like I know curators, and this comment was that there are people who are working 9 to 5s who are working really hard and they're too tired to go out at the end of the day. And I think that also comes down to the massive elephant in the room that is about Vancouver's affordability and the availability of, which is why I love the idea of these public spaces, why I love the idea of, instead of us talking about how can we create these new things, how can you engage existing curators who are doing things on a shoestring and support them to create more free, accessible capacity and events that are engaging for free. And then listen to, because I know, Nate, you're so right. When you say how much of this is personal and how much of this is about us not wanting to go out and find things. But there's so much noise sometimes. There's so much. There's also, like, I walk down Granville Street and I don't know how to choose what the best venue is or restaurant is, and then it's not an easy thing to do. I think that again, this is why I want to drive back facilitative leadership and facilitating the existing identity based on the people who are already doing it. Despite we're not supporting people who are doing Nate, Blueprint, I would love to know how you managed to stay at the forefront of so many events and so much nightlife in this city, because you came up against so much. So you're built that way. You're that type of person that is forging through. But I have so many friends who are like, I'd love to come and see you, but I don't know where you're playing and I don't know how to find it. And I don't know. And I'm too tired, having looked after my 2 small children, to now drag myself out unless I know that it's going to be fun, because I have limited money because rent is extortionate.
Good way to put it.
I think you guys all hit the nail. I think, a lot of what you guys are saying is centered around, I think, Nate, you bring a good point. A lot of it is we got to put in as citizens and as part of the community, we got to go out and support. Government's role is just to get out of the way, and allow things to happen. Where I see the disconnect is a little bit of over social engineering on the government side. Just to remove some of that and let people make their choices. And then a lot of it does come down to communication. A lot of the time people just don't know where to go. We do a lot of that on our end from Daily High, but from a city standpoint, how have we branded ourselves?
Well,
yeah. Well, this comes to like my mind. I was like, there's a branding issue. Not only, with Granville, there's a branding issue throughout the city. We don't overtly brand our neighborhoods and our destinations well, and we don't tell the story well.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I don't disagree, man. We're really quite humble about it, and I think that we don't tell the story outwardly enough locally about what Granville Street should mean to Vancouverites and to anyone in the Lower Mainland. Like this should be our Vegas Strip. Charles, one thing, and then I'm gonna hop off this. But the other thing when you talk about communication is perception, and the perception of Granville Street has gone down the last decade to where it is now. And some of it's real, but a lot of it is just perception. And so what we need is, like, there's work to be done, no doubt, but there is a communication piece so that people understand what it actually is and then what it could be, because I think that the public perception is a lot more dire or dark than the reality.
I want to just jump in on this idea of doing events in public space, and that's something that is part of the mandate of the DVBIA and has been for quite a while. We've been supporting and providing sponsorship dollars for events to be held in public spaces, to the point that Kaylau mentioned, where people can't afford, don't have a lot of money, can't afford to pay and go into venues to see events. And so, for example, in past years, the International Jazz Festival will happen on the front plaza of the Vancouver Art Gallery and on Robson Square, really accessible. People can go and watch the shows there. And then if they do want to spend money to go see a show in a venue, then that's available to them as well. The challenge is, it's great to do it on a space that's been built to host those kinds of events, like these plazas. It's going to be another thing, to do things on Granville Street, and we need to do it. In the past, the DVBA supported events like Celtic Fest that would do, the St. Patrick's Day parade on Howe Street typically, and then they would have an event that would happen on Granville Street where vendors would be there and there'd be live music. And it was great to do that, but it was extremely expensive to close the street, to have the buses rerouted. And, it literally scares festival organizers away from using the street because of the cost of closing it. You all know that hopefully this summer we'll be going ahead with the Granville Street Promenade, an initiative that Councillor Kirby Young led and was successful in getting unanimous council support last week. And it's, very, I think it will proceed, but very challenging to, get everyone on board with doing it, closing the street, getting support from BBD. TransLink, I think, is on board in terms of rerouting their buses. So I think the challenge is we have to find a way to be able to do this much easier and do it more often on Granville Street, because I think we need to find a way to invigorate the street. And I think one way of doing that is hosting free events. And that will bring people back. It will address the things that Nate's talked about, the perception of the street. People think it's unsafe. They don't think it's for everyone. They only think the people that go down there is, on Friday and Saturday nights to drink their faces off. We need to change that image. We need to have them think that this is a place that you can bring your kids down and you can. And it can be a fun time. And, we want to reach out to all kinds of people and all demographics.
Can I I wanted to, on that note, one of the things that Chris has if anyone goes and finds Chris on LinkedIn, like I did, he has a number of other reports that he's done. And one of them, I just wanted to add this little quote, but then address one of the other big issues that actually someone simultaneously put up in the Q&A, which I hope I'm not jumping ahead of the gun here. But the quote that he had was, it was a report called Place Equity and the Power of Place. And the quote was, a destination's quality of place and perceived brand, which is what you talked about, Com, increasingly determines where talent, tourism, and investment flow. And one of the things that I think is a hindrance to Granville Street is not the people, but the homelessness that exists. And I think I was reading through this report that, or this presentation that Chris had, and one of the biggest reasons that they did a study on 1,200 Americans that came over and said, what's the biggest, most important thing when you visit? And number one is safety. And I think it's our responsibility as citizens to engage in the conversation of how do we create safety. There are, I think I Googled this, like 3,500 plus homeless, identifying homeless people in downtown Vancouver. That is a huge element of Granville Street. There's a huge issue surrounding that. We need to have a conversation around that. And I don't have any answers. I'm just putting that question out there, if it's a question.
That was actually one of the Q&A questions. I think it goes around to the point of inclusivity and safety, you know, of Granville Street, and the perception that Nate said, you know, was alluding to, and others have alluded to, that there's a reality and that there's a perception. I think you know, Granville was already kind of on a little bit of a decline, especially when you get past Nelson, you know, between Nelson and Drake, I think is where you see majority of this. You know, and I think that goes, the idea around homelessness and social housing and everything is a sensitive topic, because people always assume you're taking one side or the other, and you're either for it or against it, and there's no happy medium. Like, I always felt that for Granville Street, there should be no SROs on Granville Street. If this is your entertainment district, this is your commercial district, your retail district, your culinary district, this is where you want to host a bunch of free events, why place SROs above all that noise 24/7? There's a block to the east, there's a block to the west that you can put these SROs on. Nobody's advocating for no SROs. We're just saying, don't put them on Granville, because this is.
Which is fair, but I mean, England has council estates right next to some of the most expensive real estate. I still think that I still think it's possible, but I think maybe this is the conversation that needs to happen between government, because and various stakeholders, is what do we need to address first, and then how do we get collective buy-in to do that? You know, that is a bigger conversation, rather than what do we do about this piece. It's like, okay, I've made this statement multiple times just in entertainment recently. When it comes to COVID and the impact and how much people are suffering, the unfortunate fallout is that so many people are staring at their own plates and saying that they're empty, and nobody is watching the garden, and realizing that we haven't planted enough in the garden. And I think this is where this disconnect between government, between, you know, funding bodies, between, you know, the Downtown Vancouver Business Association, all of these people who all care. We need to have a collective conversation, including our citizens and the stakeholders, about, and then make some, they're not easy choices, but make some decisions on what needs to happen first. You have places, people like Cineplex, who are coming in, who are going to invest a lot of time and energy and obviously money in developing a certain aspect. Those people need to get on the same page and know the people who are working with the downtown east side, the downtown homeless population. Like, how do we do that? How do we fix that, Calm?
You're asking me to fix that by myself?
Yes.
If I could fix that, then I think I would be very, very wealthy, because I can go tour around the world and fix it in any city. I think the biggest thing is just having a conversation and being open to talking about it, and not making it like the boogeyman in the room, right? Like having a conversation around it, I think, is the first step. And you know, to bring it a little bit back on topic, just for Granville Street, and because I think we can have a lengthy discussion on social housing and homelessness. You know, does it belong on Granville Street is probably the question that I would have asked council. And, you know, I advocated very openly, saying that, look, put social housing where you can also build a lot more units elsewhere. You're constricted in a lot of areas on Granville. I know, you know, it's easier said than done, and I know council has a mandate that they have, and there's BC Housing and a lot of other bodies involved, but you know, just having discussion and a little bit more transparency around how things are going. And once they're actually in there, the conditions that these individuals live in, and what are we actually doing to improve their lives beyond like, hey, here's a roof over your head, see you later. Because that's kind of what we do here in this country and in this city, you know. That's a deeper discussion. And I think, you know, maybe the DVBA can host another one with down the road, and I'll gladly jump in on that one. But it is worth pointing out that we do need to address it, and you do want people to come in and feel safe, even if it is just a perception in their head that it's not safe. I live right around there, so to me, I'm used to it. It doesn't feel unsafe to me. I walk around, you know, and there's nothing wrong. I'm fine, but that's me, and I don't know how others perceive it and how they feel, and I can't control that, and nor should I want to put my feelings on that, right? So that's a lot. It's going to be part of the discussion around this. I think the more you activate a space and stuff, everything kind of just starts to kind of evolve, but you want to do it without displacement. I think the key is without displacement. That's all. If you can do it without displacement, then you're winning, I think. And I think the plan that Resonance has put together actually acknowledges that and doesn't want to displace, but they want to make it better. So, you know.
Yeah, Karma, if I could just jump in on this issue, you know, the DVBI did also express concerns about, you know, building non-commercial uses or permitting those non-commercial uses in the GED. And, you know, we believe that, you know, building more commercial and providing more commercial space is, you know, the path forward. And as I said in my opening remarks, you know, we need to find a way to transform the GED into more than just a nighttime economy. And again, that example I used of the Tomley Music Building and adding 500 plus employees in that area, you know, in the short time that they were there, before the pandemic, you know, we were starting to see some really positive changes in terms of having a daytime workforce population there. And how can we replicate that? You know, how can we provide, you know, more office space in that full length of the GED in the pockets? You know, those vacant lots that were going to be built for housing. You know, can't we convert that into commercial uses, office towers and hotels? You know, we all know that we have a shortage of hotel rooms in this city, and it got exacerbated during the pandemic when hotels were sold to BC Housing to house the homeless. And not commenting on that, good or bad, I mean, we all agree that people that are living on the streets need to be housed, but it took out, you know, a significant number of hotel rooms, you know, that we're going to need when the economy bounces back in the city. So I think for the GED, the path forward is, you know, we've got to broaden the demographic. We need to add a workforce population there during the day, more footfall. We've got this great opportunity. We have 16% of the street level spaces that are vacant. You know, how can we turn that into an opportunity to rebuild the street?
Charles, can I ask you a question there? Sorry, Calm.
No, go for it.
I wanted to, that was a perfect segue into my brain, because I was wondering, what can people do? You know how, what's the thing where, like, if you have a gas station and you can't use it for a certain number of time, for a certain number of years, what can we do potentially? I love that comment about hotel spaces. I didn't even think about it, but you know, utilizing spaces that are currently vacant, and creating these pop-ups that we're all talking about. Like, what does that look, Nate? I would love to hear what you think, just from an events perspective. Like, what could that look like? Like, what do your audiences want? Could you do pop-up, like these really cool, like underground dinner parties that are above ground? Because obviously I'm on an above ground panel and not talking about things that you're not supposed to do.
That are illegal. Yeah, and I don't even think that it's about events necessarily. I think that a lot of those spaces can be used for daytime activations for like almost anything cultural. And that's what I think we need to push across, is the importance of that, and taking down the barriers from a city hall perspective, from a zoning perspective, from like all of these things. So much of it gets back to red tape. It's not that there's a paucity of good ideas out there, because that's not true. This is a very creative city. People get creative. They've had to, especially considering the high cost of living and rent and all these sorts of things. So it's about welcoming that mindset and letting people loose and saying, okay, this sounds great. This isn't a public safety issue. This is going to bring down this many people. This is going to elevate our culture as a city this way. Awesome. And in terms of using some of the spaces for hotels or other businesses, Charles, yeah, that's great. It looks great on paper, but it does get into the larger question of zoning, and the reason why, say, the 800 block is is not being realized to what the Bonus family is picturing or what it could be, and frankly, my opinion, should be. You know, if you're a developer and you're going to go in and try and build a hotel, and they're like, but it can only be 4 stories. You can't block out the sun. You can't do all these, like, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna move on. So, you know, there's a little bit of work to do at City Hall, and and with zoning and everything, and there's the communication that has to happen. That's all it is. It's engagement, you know, and having some good ideas. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming close to the time, but I just want to respond to that 800 Granville thing. You know, we did a survey on Daily Hive, and 4,000 people took that survey, and 85% of those people are like, that's exactly what we need on that block. You can't ignore that. That's a large percent of the population saying like, yeah, build this thing. And, you know, the city, you know, background for a lot of people that may be listening is the city is like, well, we can't really do this yet because we don't have a plan for, you know, Granville, or there's a citywide plan that's being undertaken, and that's been undertaken for like the last 4 years, I think. We're waiting for this plan to come out, so then we can go ahead with more decisions around this kind of stuff. We need to just make decisions when they're brought to us. If a private enterprise or an individual or a company is like, hey, I want to invest some money into this street, City Hall should be like, okay, here's some of our conditions, but we like this. Not like, I don't know about this. Let me see what you got and we'll think about it, which is normally the approach that is taken here. And to the point where, you know, Chris was saying, and I think Charles, you alluded to, a lot of tech companies are still coming out here, right? But there's a lot of homegrown startups that are growing here, that are hiring actively. You know, forget the Amazons and the Microsofts. In the last 6 months, 7 Vancouver or Vancouver area companies grew to a valuation of over $1 billion. 7 of them. And Nate's got his eyes raised. Yeah, you know, we don't celebrate that. That's a win for the city. I don't think Toronto's had that yet. Montreal hasn't had that yet. And, you know, if they did that, they would be celebrating, they'd be shouting to the rooftops that this, come here, come invest, grow your business here. We didn't do that. We didn't acknowledge it. I don't think I saw anybody from council or the mayor acknowledge this amazing feat. And we need more commercial space. Despite COVID, there's only still about an 8% vacancy, I think, in the city. That's seems high. It's actually very healthy. You know, I would love it if when I was looking for locking up a lease, that 8% was the vacancy rate, because I could actually negotiate with my landlord. You know, I was sitting at a 1.5% vacancy rate, and he was like, take it or leave it. This is what I got, right? And you're paying through the nose for it. So there's also there's a, you know, housing affordability issue, but there's also a commercial affordability issue in the city. And it's all a lot of it is artificially done because of our constraints put in through our bureaucracy that we have at City Hall. A lot of these limitations that we have. Charles, I know you wanted to kind of jump in there.
Yeah, just quickly, I'm glad that 2 of you mentioned the proposal by the Bonus family for the 800 block Granville, so above the Commodore Ballroom. You know, that particular project, if it does get council approval, you know, it's going to add about 3,500 employees. I think that's the number I seem to recall reading. And so you talk about Deloitte that added 500 in the 900 block of Granville, and then this would be potentially 7 times the number. Just imagine how that would just, you know, enliven, you know, the immediate 2 or 3 blocks around Granville Street and the potential it can do. And, you know, that's going to be the lure, right? If I'm an entrepreneur and I'm thinking of opening a business, you know, I'm looking for body heat. I'm looking for people that are going to be there, you know, literally 24/7. You know, right now the foot traffic, you know, isn't there, other than in the nighttime on Granville Street. So we need to find a way to bring people down. And I don't mean to correct you, Carm, but you know,
Go for it.
on that 800 block proposal, I think Councillor Kirby Young did get a motion that passed that said that even though Granville Street planning will happen, there will be some projects that potentially could still go ahead if they help with the COVID recovery, and if they also satisfy some other conditions. And I think some of those conditions are, for example, the preservation of heritage and the adding of cultural space. And that's what that project will potentially do. So when I said I want council to be bold, we should all expect council to be bold. This is an example. This is one that they can actually say, like they did with the Cineplex proposal, this is a way to help the street rejuvenate. This is how you revitalize it. Even while planning is happening, you can move ahead with these innovative projects that may not be there in 2 or 3 years' time, because capital can go anywhere. Capital has no boundaries.
On that front, because I know that there was a question as well about how do you attract other businesses. Cineplex is making a significant investment, and believe it or not, I actually worked with our C-suite to compel the board to actually make an even greater investment, because part of what really made that argument whole and what everybody was aligned with was the vision that we had for this location of the Rec Room being our Western Canadian flagship. And you don't use the term flagship loosely as a national brand, but I think about all the hurdles we had to clear, and grateful for certainly the approvals that we had, but we were relentless in our pursuit of this, this site, and we're able to, through the resources and experience we have, and again, that commitment to seeing it through, really provide a proposal that got that caught the interest and satisfied certainly part of the inherent visioning, even if it's not entirely complete, the plan for Granville. But I would say that the business case that needs to be made for other businesses really will be strengthened by allowing mixed use, commercial, recognizing that bringing in major players in the office space, are really going to animate the daytime, day part, and provide, that what we're calling that, and certainly what Chris's proposal noted as that 24-hour animation. It's going to be necessary, because obviously when we look at, your traditional KPIs and metrics to analyze sites, population density, your demographics, your disposable incomes, your incomes, those are all really important. But how do you achieve that? And we talk about diversity of culture and intersectionality, and creating a space for all to enjoy. Well, that's why you have to look at proportionate representation of your retail versus your leisure versus your commercial, in order to actually maximize on the use of that entire space, and to ensure that it is animated through all those different day parts. And then you do get a company like Cineplex that says this will be our Western flagship. And now, we're making that bet because we want to be part of the change. But in order to entice others, that value proposition really needs to be clarified.
100%.
So well said.
Very well said. Charles, I had a quick question for you, because I think, you might know, but I've had chats with a lot of people in retail, and they've said that there's a lot of big box retailers that do want a downtown flagship, as Christina mentioned, but they can't find the adequate space. Now, with 800 Granville, that corner of, Granville and Robson, which I think is now becoming our Burrard and Robson, right? Granville and Robson is becoming the new kind of like epicenter. That corner has that one on the southeast side, right? That's the southeast side, which is the Payless shoes. A company like Uniqlo, Simons, the Jordans, a lot of these brands have said, hey, we want to be in downtown Vancouver, but where do we go? We want to be either on Robson or on Granville. And all of the spots are usually kind of taken. Pacific Center is constrained, right? It can't, unless it can build up higher somehow, I don't know. It's constrained in its use. What have you heard kind of in terms of the retail landscape of big box retailers kind of wanting to find space in Vancouver?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in this field, but yeah, it's very difficult, I think, to find the right space. And we know that over the years, you'll literally have a number of companies trying to land the right space. Sport Check is a great example. They were leaving Pacific Center Mall, and they scooped up that Chapters location, or what was the Chapters location. I just think it's extremely challenging, but I think there's opportunities on Granville Street to attempt to do that. If you're allowed to build higher and denser, and you have buildings there that are 1 or 2 stories and they're not of heritage value. Why don't we provide opportunities for retailers that are looking to be downtown along Granville Street. And that goes to the point that I made earlier about hotels, you know. Let's try to find a way. I mean, there's some vacant spots, there's vacant spaces on Granville Street. I think there's 3 of them right now that are like surface parking lots that can be repurposed for better uses. But again, we need our city government to, you know, to change it, change the zoning, allow this to occur, incentivize, you know, our developers to do something different, and make it easier for them to do. You know, CK's talked about, you know, they had a vision and they were, I think she used the word relentless in wanting to land there because they saw the potential of what that could be. And, you know, they're right on the edge of the CBD, you know, and I think there's an opportunity with the 800 block proposal by the Bonas family to drag that CBD 1 more block over. And then, you know, how do we allow that to materialize the length of the street? You know, and I think we let the developers look at those opportunities. You know, could we do a big box retailer, you know, in a block south of Robson Street or along that corner? So I think you just need to find a way to make policy easier for developers that will benefit both the community and also benefit them, because I mean, that's what they're in business for, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Can I come very quickly?
Sure.
Can I just recap with my crazy notes what I think I'm hearing everyone say right now? Because I think there were some really key things that I don't want to lose, and I don't want
Actually,
our audience to lose.
Kayla, so I
Yeah.
was just gonna say, I wanted everybody to kind of give their final thoughts.
Oh, great. Perfect. I'll just then.
So this could be, you kick it off and then we'll go down through if anybody else has some final thoughts. Because I know it is 12:30 and we were supposed to cut it off at 12:30. So I want to make sure we wrap it up pretty soon. And I'm getting
Gotcha.
hungry, so.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, I'll take 35 seconds.
Yeah.
What I heard was, you know, we need braver bureaucrats. We need engaged citizens. We need all ages activated spaces. We need to adopt trials and pilots of projects. We need to tell better stories and celebrate them. We need to create career paths in order to sustain people in this city. Within the entertainment district, that's a different conversation. And that all equals the facilitated identity that I think we're all looking to try and achieve. That's me. That's done.
You summed it up pretty well. You took my notes. and
Sorry.
said 'em. It's all good. You did my job for me.
In different colored pen.
Christina Kuipers, I'll let you go next.
I would just say simply that, you know, and I realize it may seem easy to say, look, you know, you're in this executive position at Cineplex, of course you get to make those decisions, but you don't. Honestly, you have to be an activist in your own right in terms of where you can, again, intersect the business case with the cultural need and advocate for it as much as possible and satisfy both of those requirements and any other considerations, you know, that you need to make in terms of getting approvals, gaining traction and gaining support. And, you know, were it not for the framing, frankly, of, you know, over the years of how important we can, you know, really take this leadership stance, how importantly we can really lead by example in investing in the community, this wouldn't have come to fruition in the manner that it has. And I mean, the number of revisions on design are staggering, and it is truly a commitment to ensuring that we, you know, do find the best way possible to bring this concept to honor the community and honor the placement as the Western flagship. And so, you know, to whatever extent you can, as a consumer, as a member of some sort of a community, of an association, of an organization, you know, be an interested party and find a way to advocate for the change that you want to see. Because it really can. Honestly, every effort is worth it because it really will have a collective impact.
Thank you. Well said. Nate?
Yeah, not a ton to add. They kind of nailed it, but yeah, supportive council and mayor, supportive public. You know, we need some more progressive operators down there as well, both big and small. Yeah, you know, our relationship down there with the VPD is really good, but there's some more community policing that could happen, especially in light of the Howard Johnsons and those things. And I think that the Granville Street, the proposed closing for this summer sets a good precedent for closing the street for other festivals and things that, some of us have been talking about for years and have only seen a couple of times. But yeah, other than that, no, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I think this was a constructive conversation.
Sweet. Charles?
Yeah, two quick things. I look back at when the organization, the DVBIA, did the Reimagine Downtown Vancouver, and how that became very much, our beacon as an organization to start to see changes happen within the DVBIA area as a whole. I would say Reimagine Granville Street, this report done by residents, should be our beacon. It should be the path forward in terms of making change, and it could happen right away. And we've started to see it with the temporary patios. We're going to see it with the Granville Street Promenade. But we should be, I like the word relentless in our pursuit to affect change on Granville Street. And I would add that there has to be a sense of urgency. Like, it doesn't have 5 years. We should start to see a material change within the next year or two. Like, otherwise, I do worry about where Granville Street will go in the future. But I'm buoyed by the enthusiasm, the companies that are there, the companies that will soon be there, in terms of them contributing to changing the street.
Thank you, Charles. I mean, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is your last public appearance, as the DVBIA president. So I want to say thank you for taking the time to, for not only being a part of this, but for everything that you've done since joining the DVBIA. I look to you as someone that is done more for this city than a lot of people that sit in city halls, rooms have done. And if anybody deserves a street named after them, it's you. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I do also want to welcome the new DVBA president, Nolan Marshall III. I'm excited to have him join the community, and I look forward to, hopefully working and continue to working with the DVBA through him and his crew. I just want to thank everybody else on the panel for taking the time out today. And everybody that, there's a lot of questions, Q&A that was going on. I know we can't answer them all, but Christina, thank you for answering a few of them and picking them. I was going to go through them and you picked them for me, so I appreciate that. I think to end the session, there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of get across. I think Granville Street is our street. It's our Michigan Ave. It's our Queen Street, but it's been ignored. And we can't ignore it. And what Charles said is it has to be done with a sense of urgency. We can't sit there and wait for things to just miraculously happen or keep passing the buck to the next person. The time is now. Getting out of COVID, economic recovery, bringing people back downtown, making them want to come back downtown is vital to the success of not only that street, but the success of the city. And I don't think people understand how vital the downtown and the Granville Street is. It's the energy hub that radiates throughout. So how do we bring that energy back? Bigger and better than ever, but more inclusive. And, Christina Kuipers, and I'm actually really looking forward to the rec room. I'm going to spend a lot of time there myself. But Nate and Blueprint and all of them have done a lot of work. The artists that, Christina, you guys talk about, you guys bring a lot to the table. It can be our premier street. I think we need to own it and go forward and start building towards that. And it can be done. It's going to need it just needs a little bit of push from City Hall, right? Something like this needs 4 elements to be successful. It needs a plan. Residents kind of put one together. So we got that. It needs private investment. There's a lot of people looking to invest, put their money on this into the street. Public support. If you go on any social media platform, you go on our website, you go anywhere, people want to see Granville thrive and be alive, better than it ever has been. They want that. So you got those 3 elements. The only missing element is the political will to make it happen now. That's the missing element. And Charles, to your point, I think that the council has recognized that, and they are taking steps and eliminating some of the perception of complacency that might have been placed on them, rightfully or wrongfully so, however you want to look at it. But we need them. This is council. It's in your court to approve 800 Granville. You can't wait for city staff to give you the go ahead. You've been elected. You're, you know, the mayor, you're in this seat. Do your job. This is what we got you in power for. And if you ain't gonna do it, there's an election next year. People won't forget. I won't forget, and I won't let others forget, right? So I think there's a lot of great momentum there. Let's build on that. And then from the public standpoint, what can you do? I think we've already said it, but you know, if you ain't happy with it, go on Twitter, let people, let council, let the mayor know. Engage in any, you know, open houses and right to council in support of some of the initiatives that are happening on Granville. Participate on the initiatives. Go out on the promenade when the, you know, the pedestrian only promenade opens up. Go out and enjoy it. Attend, you know, and support the arts and culture that's in this community, in the city. There's a lot of great artists that are from Vancouver that are creating great stuff. Let's showcase that. Let's Granville be the showcase for that, and let's support them. And thank you everyone for listening and being part of the panel. It was a pleasure.